Thank you.
Assemblyman, I have a few questions. I haven't been a city councilwoman. I was actually also the chair of the redevelopment agency when I was there for a couple of years. And my city back then, prior to me, was probably one of the worst abuser of eminent domain, known statewide. Books have been written about them. Garden Grove. But when I got there as the chair of the redevelopment agency for the next 2 years, we did a phenomenal job without doing any eminent domain. And so I've had an opportunity to really look behind the scene, understand redevelopment, how it got started, where we were, and where it was heading into the city, for the city. Garden Grove did a great job. Prior to me, there was a street that had, when I moved there back in the early 90s, there's tons of prostitutes, tons of motels with drug dealers, you name it, starting at like 3 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And when they did their, redevelopment, it changed the area. It connects to Disneyland. North of it, and so they did a good job. Now, they did it with the abuse of eminent domain. We continue it without the abuse of eminent domain. So one of, my concern in this bill is the eminent domain part. I believe this bill, the intent that you have is excellent, and it's the right thing to do. We need to give cities a tool for disadvantaged areas, and we also need to give the tools for the public to be engaged and the people affected in the area. But the eminent domain part really makes me very uncomfortable. We can talk about disadvantaged areas. The problem with is you can put in tools for them to engage, but if they don't have the ability to verbally and have a stronghold of the English language, and they're from a cultural background that are not very that might not be aggressive in terms of wanting to confront government, that tool is not going to help for these individuals, these neighborhoods, especially if they're newcomers of a particular immigrant community that are just barely developing. So, what you have right now, I don't know if it would stop or gives that ability to these residents. And so my first question in regards to that, as you said, two individuals from the affected area. Of how many members of the board? Five. So 2 really, at the end of the day, doesn't do a lot. I mean, you still have a majority that's not in the affected area. So I'm not sure if that is.
Three are elected officials, though, from that city or that county. 3 are from that body that created the entity. So they're accountable by the fact that they're elected officials. Okay.
And then the other question that was asked earlier, or comments and questions mentioned in regards to, because redevelopment, Senator Morlock is correct. Actually, one of my city was 100% redevelopment. I was shocked when I found that out. I didn't know that when I was sitting supervisor to redevelopment went under, as then we start seeing all the cities sprung up and having financial problems. When you're talking about the authority that's going to be created, the question would be is, redevelopment was created for citywide. It was one agency. Are we talking about every area will have its own agency now? Because you said only affected areas. Can someone answer that?
If you, in a city, if this tool is used, there would be an entity, and that entity would describe where, they would define where the areas were. They'd obviously be the public process that we've touched on, and the tool would apply in those areas that are designated and agreed to locally. There wouldn't be multiple agencies in a single city.
Okay, so, well, because redevelopment agency was created for citywide, and they, in the agency itself, was able to identify certain areas. You stated here, though, is that 2 out of the 5 members will be from the affected areas. So how is this going to work? Is this a community revitalization and investment authority, and under that you have multiple board or committees? I mean, because you said affected areas.
You would first have a community, you'd first have to make sure that the area you're looking at matches the criteria that was mentioned earlier. It has to be lower income. It has to have some of the other conditions we've touched on. And then you would have to have the community agree, basically, that that's what they wanted.
I'm sorry, I don't think you're, okay, let me try this again. Sorry, maybe my question is not. Redevelopment Agency, RDA, is one agency within the city. Within that, they have multiple projects, but there's only one body, which is 5 of the council members and the mayor, or whatever the city is, okay, in terms of numbers. Okay, this, you stated that each of these, it's only within affected areas. So if there are multiple affected areas, how are you going to have 2 individuals from the affected area serve? Are we talking about multiple committees? Because areas affected could be north, south, east, west.
Could be many affected areas, but only 2 members out of 5 are from overall from whatever those different areas are. You only have 2 of those public members from.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense to me then, because how's that possible when an affected area could be from the west side versus from the east side? How do you justify that the 2 individuals from the west side would know what's happening in the east side?
You're not. You might have 1 from each, depending on who they decide to choose. It might be 2 from one of those from the same area. It might be 1 from each, or 2 from the other areas. The overall construct is there'll only be 2 public members from all these areas. So if there's 3 different areas in one city, you'll have 2, but doesn't mean you're gonna have 2 from the. You're not gonna have 6 public members if there's 3 areas in a city. Just 2 overall, representing the public interest in those affected areas.
Well, that's kind of, I'm sorry, then to me, that's a wrong definition. You can't say that these 2 public members are from affected areas when they aren't. Because, I mean, if it's like I just said.
If they reside there, there are public members who are residents.
Well, then you should state then on your bill, then it should say 2 individuals, 2 residents of the city, or 2 public members. You can't state that it's 2 public members that are from within the affected areas. To me, if I live in the neighborhood, I want to be on that board, not having the person from the south side dictate what's going to happen in my neighborhood. Right? Am I incorrect? I'm trying to understand this. Because if you make the statement in your bill that says 2 individuals from the affected areas will represent the residents in the affected areas, how could someone from the west side know what's going to be on the east side? That doesn't mean, I mean, the 2 individuals from the west side should be dictating or have the authority to talk about what's going on the west side, not what's going on the east side or central, because you're not in the affected areas.
I'm not sure if you want to add anything else more.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at where we've come from, the old tool, as you've talked about, had the city council sitting as the redevelopment agency. As Mr. Leo touched on, all of those individuals are elected from the community, so they obviously represent the community. In helping work on this tool, we wanted to make sure there was even a closer connection than before to those that are affected, because you could have council members that you could have 5 council members in an old RDA, and nobody on the council really lived or was from the area that was subject to the RDA. So what we're trying to do is make a higher level of accountability between the areas that are impacted and the body, and to do that. So what we've done, and you know, it could always be different, but what we've done is to try to make sure that 2 people from the affected area are represented on the board. Now, you raise a good question, which is like, well, what if there are multiple areas? You know, well, if there's one on the east side, one on the west side, presumably you could have 1 person from the east side and 1 person from the west side. They're both on the board. You could expand the board and have more public members if you have more areas. I mean, we're not against the community connection. We were trying to make the community connection that really hadn't been there before.
Yeah, and I appreciate the effort. I'm just more of, you know, call it for what it is. If you want 2 public members, call it 2 public members. don't call it two individuals from affected areas, because that, to me, is disingenuous. It really is. You know, like I said, I'm a big fan of the bill in terms of your concept in trying to get, you know, revitalize these neighborhoods. But let's not do it while we are, you know, making these statements that's not accurate and it's incorrect. You know, it should just be two public members, because you can't.
Technically, it is correct, though, because they are public members who reside from those impacted areas. By definition, by legal definition, they are. So it's not being disingenuous whatsoever. You might have a different approach on that, but they are, when you're actually having public members who are chosen that actually live in those areas, when we say they're public members from those affected areas, that's exactly what they are.
And Assemblyman, and that's what, well, I think what concerned me earlier was that you kept on, or I don't remember who's made the statement, but it's we're going to have two individuals from the affected area. Please go forward and make sure that we make the comment then, if it's not in the bill. I haven't read it in great detail. You're more knowledgeable about it than I am, because you've been working on it for 3 years. But if it's two public members, let's just call it for two public members. And, you know, maybe, or if you would consider going forward is to define that definition. What is affected areas membership means? You know, because I think it would help local government, because, you know, at the end of the day, there are very large cities that has a lot of manpower, staff, lawyers, and everybody to interpret different ways, and you have smaller cities, and I have a lot of very, very, very small cities who doesn't have that option. To have that many staff to help them and do the definition of what's considered affected, what isn't, and then they're going to be sued. And that's when, you know, the coffers of the city funding should not be, you know, I wouldn't say wasted, but it could have been gone to other efforts. The other thing is, would this allow cities to do what they did in the past, is zone the full city under this plan? Because back then, some cities, like one of my city, zoned the entire city as redevelopment agency zone.
The answer, I think, would be no. They
Okay.
cannot, because you have to meet the criteria in order to be one of the designated areas that is included in that CREA, or the plan that is approved by the public. Dan, you want to add to that?
I think the only thing to your point is, if you had a community that the entire city was had a population that was under 80% median and the entire city was deteriorated and had high crime and high unemployment, then maybe in that case, yes. But what you won't see is, I think in the past, some of the concerns in the legislature was they were seeing more affluent areas that were being called redevelopment areas. That's not going to happen anymore under the definition of this bill. It has to be a poor area, otherwise it's not going to qualify.
Madam Chair.
Real quick, Mr. Nair, not.
Madam Chair, the fact is that quite a few cities would almost entirely meet the definition and therefore could be in the new authority.
If they're disadvantaged, but I think what the real question was, is those communities that as we described, are affluent and were subject to criticism that they were being considered as blighted areas when they were in fact not. And that was one of the biggest criticisms of former redevelopment law. We've addressed that so that does not take place with this new tool.
I have two more questions. One is, if I recall correctly, RDA in the past always had to be in a deficit to be able to exist. So that's why the city, they always owe the city money. One of the things when I found out about that, I said, you know, I mean, that doesn't help the city if you don't start paying back the city the money, right, into the general fund. So one of the things that I did was, we had these little lots in my city that was just vacant because we had a certain, you know, development or street project that still kept it open. So we start selling those, and it brought back the agency as a surplus, so that surplus has to be returned back to the city, which is a great thing. Under this proposal, would it allow city to continue under this authority to be under a deficit, and is there a safeguard to when they have to start paying back the city?
When you set one of these up, the only income that the entity would have would be the growth in the tax increment. There is the ability of a city council or some other entity to loan money to the entity if they choose, But other than that, there is no other obligation to the city as an entity.
Thank you. Last question, when you mentioned about residents being able to protest, is there a particular square mileage that you have to live within that area, of affected area, to be able to protest? Is it defined?
It's you have a map of whatever the area is, and then you have a public process, where you're explaining things to that community and getting their input. It's the residents of that affected area are the ones that would decide whether or not they thought it was appropriate.
So there isn't any definition of it, like a square mile? Because usually, we're 500 square miles. If you're an elected, you cannot be, if it affects your home, you're not allowed to be part of the discussion. So there's no particular square mileage. I mean, could it be 25, 100?
I think what you might be referring to, Senator, is a conflict of interest issue. There's nothing in the bill that changes the conflict of interest
No,
statute.
I'm not talking, no, I'm just using an example because you said that residents can protest. What are we, when we talk about residents, are we talking about 50 square miles, 25, 100? Because it could be defined pretty large.
It would be defined in the plan where the discussion would be, shall we have in this area of the community, it would have a specific map where it'd be these streets, these neighborhoods, these areas are the proposed area to have this tool. And then those residents in that area would be the ones that would make the decision about whether or not they thought this tool was
The authority
appropriate.
would come up with the map.
Yes, everyone would know whether they're in the map or not, and it's the people that are affected that would have the decision.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. With that, just maybe a consideration so that we don't have to come back and update the bill in the future is maybe up to certain square miles for residents' input, because if you do that, then there's no argument down in the cities or the local districts to say, well, we thought it would be 25, 100, or whatever it is. I mean, just a thought. And that's all the questions I have. Thank you. Senator Bell?
I know this issue will probably come up later, but what percentage of the revenue of the tax increment goes to housing?
25%, which is an increase of, former redevelopment allows 20%. This bill is for 25.
Okay, I think there ought to be a higher level for housing. That's just, we don't have to deal with it here, though.
Right, but this was something, the 25% we worked out with all the affordable housing advocates, and this was an increase from former law, and that's why they're strongly in support, yeah.
I think it should be higher myself. So when maybe we deal with it at the next committee, you have to talk to the committee there.
Which you're the chair.
I'm just telling you.
So you know what the chair's number one priority would be.
Okay, the imminent, and kind of the reason is this is kind of like a redevelopment for poor cities and poor areas, okay, kind of what it is. Essentially, it's a redevelopment for poor cities and poor areas. And that probably is more with the original intent of redevelopment when it was first established, to take areas that are kind of, there's no tax increment growth or anything. It needs some kind of extra help to increase the job opportunities of the area. So in that sense, it's a good thing. And we need to kind of have some way in California of having some kind of economic development growth, especially for these poor areas. And I think you put in there the 80% or lower for the areas we're talking about. So you can't go into like wealthy downtown areas or anything. It kind of doesn't work for like a downtown redevelopment project or some kind of the kind of things we did in the past with redevelopment when I was the chairman of the San Jose Redevelopment Agency. So this is real kind of a combination of sort of the old enterprise zone redevelopment kind of thing, for that kind of. Have you thought of other kinds of incentives to put in the bill to incentivize economic development in addition to the tax increment as a possibility? Are there other things that you're looking at to incentivize growth or economic development for this population, this area?
Senator, speaking on behalf of the league, you know, we think it's the legislature is obviously in different programs, cap and trade and others, is beginning to focus on the disadvantaged community issue. And as I mentioned before, our definitions in the bill are very similar to the states. What we're hoping is at some point, this gives the communities that we're talking about an ability to do something to help themselves, rather than just waiting for something to come from the state. They have some ability to help themselves, and maybe at some point in the future, if the tool ever gets established and as we move forward, to the extent there are state programs that are trying to help these areas, and there are local efforts that such as we've discussed, that are also making a contribution, that there can be some coordination of resources. But, you know, we first have to get the tool established.
Now, is there any provision in here that prevents a municipality that creates these areas from supplanting existing city or county services that are existing? So like you decide to use the redevelopment money for things that in the past were used, funded by other revenues from the county or city? Is there anything that prevents that?
I'd have to go through the bill. I mean, clearly the...
Well, you better find it.
Well, I'm saying that the intent of the bill is that you're using these areas to help address the issue of blight that's in the area. I mean, that's the focus of the bill.
It doesn't do any good that if you're a city council member and you're sitting here and you have a budget deficit and you decide to use redevelopment money to do basic city services in these poor areas with redevelopment funds like road repairs and other kinds of programs, and then take the general fund money out of that area and use it for other things. That's what I'm talking about. It's called supplantation. And is there anything that prevents that?
Yeah. But just on behalf of the league, I mean, we would have no concern with any additional clarifying language to ensure that doesn't occur.
Well, maybe I'll work on
Certainly
that.
not the intent of.
Yeah, I know that you.
That's a preview for when you go to his.
Yeah, well, I'm raising the, I want to raise these issues because I think supplantation is a very important thing. I mean, we can't increase taxes and then have, sorry, we're still, you didn't miss anything.
I tried several times.
Anyway, so that's an issue I think it's very important to address. For me, I don't think this really, honestly, it doesn't really, the intent is different. And in addition to SB 628, which we passed last year as a general kind of for any kind of infrastructure financing, that bill is got a particular purpose for infrastructure financing. This bill is more of an economic development tool for low income communities and areas in our state. So I think there's a different purpose, and wouldn't you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Two different purposes.
I was very supportive of the IFD projects. That's
Yes.
important too. This is geared for the most neediest communities.
So when people say we already have one, we shouldn't have the other, I don't, as the author of that bill, agree with that. I think this has a different purpose than SB 628. So this one.
I think this goes to your committee, right? Is it
Yeah,
a recommendation?
we'll go, yeah.
Do you have a motion on this bill? Moved by Pavley. Is that do pass as amended to the Committee on Transportation and Housing, chaired by the handsome Senator Bell? I was raising you before you got in here on your issues on.
All right.
You know, what else am I missing? Anything further? Anybody else has any?
Just the author's close and we're good to go.
Authors, quick close.
Mr. Chairman, we had a thorough discussion. I respectfully ask for your aye vote. But again, we've built bipartisan support because we think I've addressed a lot of the concerns thoroughly over the last 3 years, a lot of the issues that were raised here in the questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That was a great presentation. I just want you to know. Secretary, please call the roll.
Hertzberg?
Aye.
Hertzberg, aye. Wynn? Bell? Bell, aye. Hernandez? Hernandez, aye. Laura? Morlock? Morlock, no. Pavley? Pavley, aye. 4-1.
4-1, we'll remain it open. Keep it open. Okay, file item number 1, AB1. I want to know what AB1's about because that's the first bill introduced in the legislature in the other house. AB1 by the publisher.
You know,
Cheryl Brown, Assemblywoman Cheryl Brown. Okay. What do you got to say? This is file item number 1.
okay. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. First of all, I want to say that I'm accepting the amendments your committee proposed, and I want to thank your staff for working on this issue with me. Second, I'd like to add Senator Nielsen. He's reached out to me, and he'd like to be added as a co-author. So could your committee please add him?
We'll take that amendment.
Okay. AB1 is a simple bill that will prohibit municipalities from imposing a fine under any ordinance for failure to water your lawn, or from having a brown lawn during the period for which the governor has declared a drought emergency. During this historic drought, this is really a modest measure. However, 80% of much of the water we use is to water grass we can't eat. In one of my communities, there were people who were not watering their grass, and they were fined. So this is a measure that says we need to do something about that here at the state so that we don't waste the water. And I am so happy that I was able to get AB1 because water is very important to the state of California at this time.
Well, I figure with AB1 and being Assembly Member Brown, those are pretty good chances of getting this thing signed. Well, and also Governor Brown. I figured, come on. Anybody in support? Anybody opposed? Oh, support, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Yeli Govrich. I'm with the California Association of Realtors, and we understand that Californians are not meeting their goals of reducing water consumption, and so we need more incentives and rewards instead of punishment for people who conserve, so we're in strong support. Thank you.
Where's Christopher Carlisle? How come he's not here supporting it?
I do the land use and water issues. He does tax and finance.
I see, okay.
Jennifer Franklin with East Bay Municipal Utility District. We believe the bill would encourage water conservation and support the bill.
Sir.
Silvio Ferrari with the California Building Industry Association support.
Any in opposition? Senator Morlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assemblywoman Brown, I'm just curious, local municipalities should be taking care of this, and you would think they kind of understand that finding people for not watering their lawns right now is sort of...
Yes, I first brought this measure up last year, and my mayors in 5 cities each told me that they would not enforce those ordinances. Come year second, they started enforcing the ordinances. That's why it was necessary. So that's why I'm back here with this bill.
So I'm concerned about local control. These mayors should, pony up and, get a clue of what's going on. So I just wonder, what kind of message are we sending, and is it enforceable?
Oh, it's enforceable. What has happened is we have one city in the Inland Empire where the city filed charges against a resident. The resident had to spend $4,000 to go to court and to remedy this issue. It started raining, and since it started raining, the grass started coming up, and they rather dropped it, but they wanted him to pay $1,000 for all of their work that they put to go through court. In another city, the code enforcement just started passing out letters saying that we're going to enforce this. If common sense would prevail, I wouldn't need this bill. Yeah. I could not believe that common sense doesn't prevail in every community.
Can we quote you on that?
Oh, sure.
We're going to leave that one alone.
Yeah, no one alone. Senator Pavley.
Yes, I'll be supporting this bill. I was just curious, though, would this statute trump the CC&Rs and homeowners associations? Because we have quite a few that have an ability to compromise on their lawns. They're either painting them, you have to have a green lawn, and it has to all match.
Well,
And so they're not doing anything to reduce their water consumption on their lawns?
We had
So-
a bill last
So how do you, does this trump CCNRs and HOAs?
Okay,
Is
we
the
had a bill
question.
last year that was authored by Ms. Campos and myself,
Yeah.
co-authored by me, and it was specifically for HOAs.
Well, that's on artificial lawns or
Yeah, they're not allowed to require green lawns during this emergency.
They're being fined, homeowners in these
Really?
HOAs, by the HOA, not the
They're not supposed to do that. That bill passed, the governor signed it, and it's been in
It's
law
out there
for a
in your neck of the
year.
woods, a lot of HOAs.
Well, probably mostly Calabasas,
Yeah.
because we don't have
Yeah,
a lot of
Calabasas.
gated communities and things like that. And so
do you
I
have a
just want to
motion?
make sure that the CCNR, I didn't know legally if we could trump CCNRs.
Okay. Senator Morlock will move it. Do pass as amended to the floor, including Senator Nielsen's co-authorship as amended by the committee. Anything further from the members? That was a brilliant close. Assemblyman Brown, Secretary, call the roll.
Hertzberg.
Aye.
Hertzberg, aye. Wynn. Bell. Bell, aye. Hernandez. Hernandez, aye. Laura. Morlock. Morlock, aye. Pavley.
Aye?
Pavley, aye. 5-0.
5-0, hold it open for the members. Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Brown. It's always good having you. Okay, next up, AB 204, right? AB 204, Assemblymember O'Donnell from the great area of Long Beach. Show us what you got.
Are you ready?
Ready.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. I would like to start by accepting the recommended amendments reflected in comment 3 of the analysis. AB 204 is a district bill and authorizes successor agencies in Los Angeles County to keep their existing oversight boards. As part of the 2011 Redevelopment Dissolution Act, oversight boards to individual successor agencies were established to supervise the dissolution of RDA projects. Current law requires all individual oversight boards in a county to consolidate into a single county-wide oversight board by July 1st, 2016. In Los Angeles County, this would effectively funnel the workload of 71 successor agencies into a single entity. AB 204 allows individual oversight boards in Los Angeles County to continue to independently operate in order to prevent both gridlock and cost increases in the RDA dissolution process. The bill is supported by the County of Los Angeles, the City of Long Beach, City of Los Angeles, and several other Los Angeles County cities. There is no opposition to the bill. And with me here today is Mr. Mike Arnold, representing the City of Long Beach.
Sir, Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Michael Arnold, representing the City of Long Beach. The author has described the bill very well. We're here to answer any questions anyone may have. Strongly in support.
Any others in support?
Sylvia Solisha, on behalf of City of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti and on behalf of the City of Santa Monica, we are also in strong support. We believe that this bill sets more appropriate time frame for the dissolution of these individual boards into one large county oversight board. So we ask for your support. Thank you.
Any opposition? Questions from the members?
Glad to move.
Senator Morlock. Moved by Senator Pavley, Senator Morlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, Assemblyman O'Donnell, if it's good enough for LA, why not for some other large counties? Orange County's got quite a few RDAs as well that we're dealing with.
That's a great question. I was coming from the City of Long Beach, having served on City Council there for nearly 11 years. I was very familiar with the redevelopment and the dissolution process. This comes actually from the City of Long Beach, but also my own personal experience. And certainly we're open to going forward any conversations where others might be included. And maybe Mr. Arnold, you'd like to comment on that?
Yeah, the only comment would be that we have 71 oversight boards in LA County, many more than any other county has. And we think in LA County, if they all go away at the same time, all being consolidated into one countywide board, it's going to create terrible gridlock.
I'm aware of that. I'm just saying, if you've got other counties that have 10 or more, why not phrase in the bill that says any county with 10 or more RDAs could also qualify, and you solve everybody else's problems. Have any other counties contacted you to be included?
Not to my knowledge.
Have you approached some of the larger counties that have a lot of RDAs?
No, we have not. We're hopeful we can work this out with the Department of Finance. At this point in time, the Department of Finance doesn't seem to like our bill, but we.
I'm for it then. If that's you.
we think.
Motion by Senator Morlock, substituted from Senator Pavley.
That's absolutely fine.
I'd just like to see.
Department of
What's
Finance.
good for one should.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. Anything further?
Just,
Oh, sir, Senator Bell.
I would advise not to include other counties.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to buy yourself big.
I just think it
Yeah,
gets
exactly.
into a thicket that we probably would never get out of if we did that, because that would involve like going back to everybody and having debates in each counties, and some counties will probably look at it favorably, others won't. It's like,
Maybe
it's a tar baby idea.
pilot program.
You know, a tar baby,
Yeah, there it
it'll
is.
get everybody all stuck, you know, and then rather than just deal with his proposal that seems like a pretty legitimate, fine proposal I would support, but
Anything to say on the close, sir? I vote.
Respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Members, this is a motion by Senator Pavley. Do pass as amended to the floor of the Senate. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to make it? You want to make the motion, Senator Morlock?
After getting the advice from Senator Bell, who is much older and wiser, I'm fine in making the motion.
Okay, we'll substitute that motion by Senator Morlock. I like this. We're getting you in the game. This is very good. Let me just say, for public record purposes,
Did border Long Beach. I mean,
I support this measure, but I'm going to lay off because of relationships I've got with some of the folks on some of the boards. So just to, in the abundance of caution, I'm not going to vote on it, but I certainly support the measure. So with that, Secretary, please call the roll.
Hertzberg, Nguyen, Bell, Bell, I, Hernandez, Hernandez, I, Laura, Morlock.
Aye.
Morlock, I, Pavley.
Aye.
Pavley, I, 4-0.
4-0, we'll keep it open. Thank you so much, Mr. Assemblymember O'Donnell. Thank you very much. Next, file item number 5, AB 464. What? Oh, Gordon? Was Gordon's here first? Oh, Mullen's not here. I'm sorry. I wasn't looking out. I'm sorry. Gordon. File item number 6, AB 495, Assemblymember Gordon.